God's chosen ones. 5 signs they're not just anyone. They're chosen like you. Some people enter with fanfare. Loud, impressive, unforgettable for all the wrong reasons. But then there are the others. The ones who didn't try to fix you. Didn't even try to stay. They just arrived. No title, no agenda, no spotlight. But somehow, their presence made the ache quieter. The room felt warmer. Your thoughts slowed down. And though they said little, something inside you whispered, "This is not an accident." Naomi never forgot her. The woman in the green scarf? A stranger at the train station who sat beside her when no one else did. She didn't ask questions. She didn't offer advice. She just said, "You're going to be okay," and not because you're strong, but because you're chosen. Then she stood, walked away, and never returned. But Naomi was never the same. You may not remember the full conversation. You may not even know their last name. But you remember how they made your soul breathe again. Because they weren't just anyone. They were a chosen one. And when heaven wants to answer you, it often sends a person, not a miracle. If someone once entered your life and touched you without trying, this story is your confirmation. They didn't just appear. They were assigned. Because when God hears a silent cry, He often responds with a voice wrapped in human skin. When heaven sends a person instead of a sign, there were seasons Naomi begged God for a sign. She wanted something obvious, a voice from the clouds, a door flung open, a dream that explained everything. But what she got? There was a person, someone quiet, someone ordinary, someone who looked her in the eye and didn't flinch when she floundered. They didn't come with a halo, but they carried peace like it was stitched into their shadow. At the time, she didn't realize what was happening. All she knew was this. When they spoke, it felt like her soul leaned in, like something ancient inside her was finally being remembered. She was sitting on her porch that evening, head in hands, world unraveling quietly, when he walked by. A stranger, just passing through, but he stopped, looked at her with eyes that knew. Not facts, not history, but essence. And all he said was, "You're not lost. You're being led." She wept, not because she understood, but because her spirit did. Now, years later, Naomi still wonders if he was real. But the shift he stirred is undeniable. That moment was not random. It was scheduled, a divine appointment, wrapped in denim and dust. And maybe there was the person you met, the one who calmed you without a reason, who didn't stay but still hasn't left your memory. You didn't dream that peace. You received it. Because when heaven wants to remind you of who you are, it often sends someone who sees it first. If you've ever felt a presence like that, one that didn't explain but awakened, then this story is for you. You're about to remember what your spirit already knows. Some people aren't just passing through. They're sent. Part 1. You feel safe before you understand why. The first time Naomi saw him, it was raining. Not the kind of rain that rushes, but a slow, thoughtful drizzle, the kind that soaks the earth like a whispered prayer. She was standing in the produce aisle of a grocery store, deciding between bruised apples and overpriced berries, when he reached for the same green pear. Their hands almost touched. He smiled. She nodded. And just like that, something shifted. It wasn't romance. It wasn't curiosity. It was recognition. The kind that makes your shoulders drop, not from exhaustion, but from release. They ended up in the checkout line side by side. She doesn't remember the exact words exchanged, just that when he asked, "Are you okay?" she wanted to say no. But instead, she just nodded again, and he looked at her, Not the way people do when waiting for your answer, but the way people do when they already know. After the store, they walked into the parking lot at the same time. Still raining, still quiet. He turned to leave, but paused. Then he said, "I don't know what you're facing, but you're going to come through it softer, not smaller." And that he walked away. She stood there, tears forgotten, breath caught in her throat. She didn't feel flattered. She felt seen. That night, Naomi lay awake staring at the ceiling, repeating his words like scripture. Softer, not smaller. She didn't know his name, didn't know his story, but somehow her soul trusted him. And that trust wasn't built. It was remembered. Later she'd wonder if they had met before, in a dream, in a prayer, in a past life, if such things were allowed. But deep down, she knew. The soul doesn't need introductions. It recognizes what God sends. There was no lightning, no angels singing, just a man in a grey hoodie who said the right thing at the right time, and left Naomi feeling like her heart had exhaled for the first time in weeks. Because when a chosen one enters your life, you don't need a backstory. You don't need permission to trust them. You just know. You feel safe before you understand why. Part 2. They say something that unlocks you. It had been 2 months since Naomi saw him in the store. Life had returned to normal, or at least the version of normal she had learned to survive in. She went to work, paid bills, prayed with half belief, but inside something had shifted. Like a locked door had been left slightly ajar and light was leaking through. Then came the cafe, a little spot off Main Street where Naomi sometimes journaled after church. A quiet table by the window, honey in her tea, notebook open like a waiting sky. That's when Micah walked in. Old friend, childhood neighbor. They hadn't spoken in years. He didn't ask to sit, he just did. And after a few awkward hellos, something deeper took over. Naomi expected small talk, but Micah didn't come with fluff. He looked straight at her and said, "I used to think you were just quiet, but now I realize you were always listening for something no one else could hear." She froze, not because it was offensive, but because it was true. He didn't know about the dreams, the visions, the nights she wept for no reason, then watched those very things unfold months later. He didn't know about the stranger at the store, the phrase she still repeated, softer, not smaller, but somehow he'd just named her essence. Like he'd been handed a key to a room she thought no one else had entered. "You have something," he said gently, "something the world didn't teach you, but life tried to bury." He sipped his coffee, unaware he'd just shattered a chain. Naomi blinked back tears. How could someone see so much in so little time? How could one sentence feel like a prophecy? Because when a chosen one enters your life, they don't just speak, they unlock. Not by shouting, not by quoting scripture, but by placing the exact word your soul has been starving for right in your lap. Micah left before finishing his cup. "Just wanted to say hi," he smiled. But Naomi knew better. That wasn't hi. That was heaven. Because the chosen ones aren't always sent to stay. Sometimes they're sent to say. And one sentence, if spirit breathed, can open what trauma closed. That night Naomi wrote in her journal, "Him heal me. He reminded me that I still had the tools. He didn't change me. He confirmed what I buried." Because the right voice at the right time doesn't tell you who to become. It reminds you who you already were. Part 3. They disrupt what you tried to hide. Naomi thought she was getting better at hiding it. The smile, the schedule, the way she answered, "I'm fine," with just enough energy to be convincing. Even the prayer team at church didn't ask questions anymore. But there are some things you can't disguise from the ones God sends. A meeting with Eliana wasn't planned. A women's gathering, a breakout group, a circle of folding chairs and cold coffee. Naomi shared little. She always chose her words like they were fragile glass, safe, vague, polished. Until Eliana spoke. She wasn't loud, wasn't flashy. She simply leaned in and said, "You've been carrying a pain that pretends to be responsibility." And the air changed. Naomi's chest tightened. Her mind raced to find a response, but there was nothing left to defend herself with. Because Eliana hadn't accused, she had revealed. "You feel guilty when you rest," Eliana whispered, "because somewhere, someone taught you that peace had to be earned." Naomi's hands trembled. Tears didn't fall from her eyes. They spilled from her soul. She hadn't told anyone that, not even God lately. But somehow this stranger-turned-sister saw past the layers of faith language and survival skills and touched the wound beneath the worship. They didn't hug. There was no altar call, just silence and knowing, and the unmistakable burn of truth doing what it does best, breaking chains disguised as coping. After the gathering, Naomi sat alone in her car, not angry, not even confused, just exposed. But for the first time, exposure didn't feel like shame. It felt like invitation to heal, to breathe, to stop hiding from the God who had never stopped seeing. She didn't call me out. She called me home. Because when a chosen one enters your life, they don't always bring comfort. Sometimes they bring confrontation, not to wound, but to wake up the parts of you that'd been asleep under sorrow. Naomi had prayed for healing. What she received was disruption, and in that disruption was the voice of God, part 4. They mirror what you forgot about yourself. It was a Tuesday evening. Naomi stood barefoot in her bedroom, facing the mirror. Mascara smudged from tears that didn't ask permission. The kind of tears that don't fall from pain, but from recognition. On her dresser sat a folded note. No name, just a message written on the back of a church bulletin from Sunday. "You are still the girl who danced before the storm hit." It was from Eliana. She had slipped it into Naomi's Bible before leaving the gathering. No signature, no explanation. Just truth, handwritten and heaven-sent. Naomi read it again. "You are still the girl who danced before the storm hit." And suddenly it wasn't just a sentence. It was a mirror, not of her face, but of her former self. She remembered her 10-year-old laughter, barefoot in the backyard. How she used to hum melodies that hadn't been written yet. How she once believed the world was more wonder than war. Before betrayal, before burnout, before the disappointment that made her faith feel like a fragile thread. But the chosen ones, they don't just speak to your present, they echo your origin. They hold up a mirror not to expose your flaws, but to recall your radiance. Naomi stared at the woman in the mirror, still standing, still here, still carrying the flicker of that barefoot girl, buried beneath deadlines, heartbreaks, and silent prayers that felt unanswered. And Eliana, without knowing her history, had handed her the key. She didn't tell me who to be. She reminded me of who I still am. Later that night, Naomi would pull out old journals, revisit dreams she shelved, whisper to God, "Is that girl still in me?" and feel his reply, not in words, but in warmth. Because when a chosen one enters your life, they don't arrive to rewrite your story. They arrive to reawaken the chapters you were too tired to finish. They become a mirror, not to show you what you've become, but to restore what you thought you lost. And sometimes the greatest healing isn't becoming someone new. It's remembering you were never broken to begin with. Part 5. They leave, but the change stays. The train pulled in late, 6:42 p.m. Naomi stood on the edge of the platform, hands in coat pockets, heart a tangle of unsent words. Eliana was leaving. Not because of conflict, not because of time, just because her assignment was finished. They hugged, briefly. No promises, no big declarations. Just two women who met in the middle of mystery and left with more clarity than closure. "I think I was sent to remind you," Eliana said quietly. Naomi nodded. But deep down she wanted to ask, "Remind me of what?" And yet she already knew. The conductor called for boarding. The doors hissed open. Eliana stepped inside, looked back once and smiled. It's not a goodbye smile. Heaven knows why. The kind that says, "You're going to be okay. You already are." The train pulled away, and Naomi stood still long after the platform emptied. Not sad, not abandoned. She didn't stay. But what she stirred never left. The next morning felt different. She made her coffee slower, let the light through the curtains touch her face. She opened her Bible and read the same verse that used to feel dry. But now it breathed. Not because the verse changed, but because she had. You see, some chosen ones aren't meant to walk the full road with you. They are meant to wake you up on the side of it. They arrive when your soul is sleeping with its eyes open. They leave once your spirit remembers how to stand again. Naomi didn't text Eliana, didn't ask if they'd ever see each other again, because she understood now. It wasn't about holding on. It was about receiving what heaven sent. The conversations may fade, the face might blur, but the shift, that stays. It becomes a new lens, a deeper trust, a truer walk. And when you find yourself breaking again, you won't be alone, because the person might let, but the presence, the seed they planted, the strength they sparked, it's still growing, the voice behind the visit. It wasn't about Eliana. It wasn't about Micah, or the man in the grocery store, or the woman in the green scarf at the train station years ago. It was always about the one who sent them. Naomi sees that now. Those encounters weren't random. They were replies, answers to the kind of prayers that don't come with words, just tears and silence, the kind of ache only heaven can interpret. She thought she needed miracles, but what she needed was mirrors. People who showed her God's love in pieces. People who arrived quietly and carried answers disguised as conversations. And maybe you've met someone like that too. Someone who didn't heal you, but made you remember healing was possible. Someone who didn't stay, but made you feel held. Someone who didn't know your story, but spoke directly into your soul. That wasn't coincidence. That was calling. That wasn't just connection. That was God speaking through human skin. So if someone changed you without even trying, if someone entered your life during your silent storm and left you standing in peace, then hear this. They weren't just anyone. They were sent. And the voice behind their visit was heaven. You're not alone. You never were. Because when you cried, God answered. Not with thunder, but with a person, with presence, with purpose. If someone once touched your life like this, comment, "They were sent." And if you're still waiting, share this, because maybe you're the one heaven's sending next.